deadly little mijo. You won't feel a thing unless she wants you to. She twists the blade. He feels it. I tell mijo what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it. I grab poor Dallas's car phone and make the most important call of my life. First, we gotta rescue Gail. Then comes the kill. The big, fat kill.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. And welcome also to the third and probably final week of Crimeac.
But it occurred to me that most of our episodes are about crime, if you think about it.
Well, yeah, this occurred to me too this week. There tends to be a crime connection in some way, shape or form. And it did occur to me that since we're doing a film with which Frank Miller was closely involved this week, that there's another film also about crime, which he directed a few short years after this one.
Well, there's two.
I was thinking of The Spirit, but what are you thinking of?
Oh my god. I was thinking about the sequel to Sin City.
Of course. And that was a couple of years after that, that's right.
Did he must have been directing that as well.
I'm not sure, but let's not get carried away talking about
did we even say we were doing Sin City this week?
I was just about to say it. So, first week of Crimeac cinematographical representations inspired by the medium of excellent comics.
Yeah.
First week was Danger Diabolic. Second week, Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
This week, Sin City. I'm your host, and joining me, as always, the Manada from Canada, Kumar.
That's like Manimal. I thought you were about to say something about Manimal. Okay.
Not this week. Alright, so Sin City, Kumar.
Okay, where do we start with this? So Frank Miller.
Okay.
It's completely Frank Miller. He drew it, wrote it, I think he lettered it even. Wow. There's no colors in it. Normally his colorist was Lynn Varley, who was, I think, his wife for a long time.
Correct.
And so what you need to know about Frank Miller is he started out basically doing pencils and I guess inks mostly for Marvel series, I think. I don't know if he ever worked at DC in the early days. But eventually he came to take over the art chores on Daredevil.
Right.
And eventually he was allowed to write Daredevil.
Right.
And he completely transformed that series. So if you read the first couple of issues of the ones that he was drawing, there were still villains showing up like Stiltman. Like just ridiculous, dumbass stuff.
Yeah.
And his thing is he's a great lover of crime novels and film noir from the beginning, so he turned Daredevil kind of into that.
And ninjas.
And ninjas, yes, he added in the ninjas. That's actually a really important point. I'm glad you brought it up, because his really hard-boiled Daredevil series became parodied in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a parody of Daredevil.
Right.
Instead of the Hand Assassins, Frank Miller's, these ninja assassins were called the Hand. They were called the Foot.
Yep.
But it was basically the same thing, and they were trying to do like this parody of the gritty style. It was exactly a parody of Frank Miller's Daredevil. And then that turned into its own phenomenon.
Arguably, well, for a while, bigger than Daredevil, really.
I think it's always been bigger. I think it still is. I don't think there's been any stage
at which it hasn't been bigger than Daredevil. Sure.
Yeah. So Daredevil was a big thing, and he also wrote a series called Daredevil Born Again, drawn by Dave Mazzucchelli, which is absolutely awesome. It's one of the best 4-issue Daredevil things. And then I think he was in Daredevil 81 to 83 or so.
Okay.
And he also did a series, and then he was doing some stuff for DC. He did a series called Ronin, which is quite interesting. And he did the two best Batman comics there are, in my opinion. Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, which was also drawn by Dave Mazzucchelli again, and is also really...
Those are both really good comics.
Yeah, and since reading those, I always felt that the best Batman stories, maybe the best anybody stories, are the first one and the last one, which is what those two are. They're like the beginning of Batman's career and the very end of it. Yeah. Anything in between is just adventures, really. It's very difficult to pull off something. And I think Garth Ennis did it with The Punisher. I think he came up with a bunch of middle adventures that are like, okay, this is like there are stakes, and they really reveal the psyche of the character. But with Batman, I'm not so sure. Anyway, so he did those. He did an electrographic novel for... he went back to Marvel. He did that. What else am I forgetting? He wrote a couple of series for Jeff Darrow, including Hard Boiled, called Hard Boiled, about this cop, or he's an insurance investor. What is he, an insurance guy?
Didn't you lend that one to me? That was a very odd one.
And then he discovers that he himself is a cyborg,
it's a bit
which
Blade
is
Runnery.
Well, it's a definitely a film noir hard boiled thing where the hunter is what he is hunting. And maybe knows it or maybe doesn't, but he's as bad as the people he's after.
That's a weird comic.
Yes, and then he did another one with kind of Astro Boy parody with him called Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot.
Okay.
And then, am I forgetting?
So you're into the early 90s yet? Because that's when Sin City
we're kind of getting there. So yeah, and then we'll kind of get into the after stuff too. He drew a Wolverine series with Chris Claremont.
So he did
in the early '80s, which was pretty cool at the time. It was like a big deal, and we reviewed it on Deconstructing Comics a while back, and it's still pretty good.
That famous cover with Wolverine beckoning.
Yes, absolutely. There's all famous. I would say. All the covers are really good, but there's one especially, I can't believe Marvel let it fly. It's just Wolverine sitting in the shadows looking depressed. And that's it. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe they published this. But I think that image...
Well, we'll come back to Wolverine.
I think that image really defined the Hugh Jackman Wolverine, the later Hugh Jackman Wolverine movies, especially The Wolverine and Logan, are
as
really...
an introspective kind of...
a depressed guy.
Who wrote Old Man Logan? Was that Mark Miller? It was, wasn't it?
Somebody else.
Another Miller.
Yeah.
Bloody Millers.
Yeah, okay, so 1991, he starts this series called Sin City.
Yes.
It was serialized in Dark Horse Presents, and I think the first one was 13 chapters, and it was really the complete distillation of Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Mickey Spillane, Will Eisner's The Spirit, that comic book which you mentioned.
Yes.
Richard Stark, the Donald Westlake, the Richard Stark novels. All those hard dudes, but with whatever shreds of humanity were in there, he's like, take all that out. And he's gone for pure. The other thing about it is, of course, the artwork, which was shock. So when he was doing Daredevil, he was kind of drawing in a.
He added a lot of shadows.
But it was a marketable.
Yeah,
it's a familiar style. Yes,
familiar. Good.
But when he got to the point where he did Dark Knight Returns, he got into this kind of scratchy line, like it was actually inked by Klaus Janson, but his line became very shaky. It was like Charles Schultz's Peanuts, where like there was there were no smooth lines. Everything was very craggly, and. But then when we get to Sin City, he changed the style again. And this time, everything's almost negative spaces. So like you'd have a black background and the people are just white. And there's no gray.
At this point, I might say, first of all, I'll say probably most people have seen Sin City that are listening to this.
Yes.
So they have an idea of what, even if they haven't read the comic, they have a good idea of what the comic looks like because it looks very much like the way the film is. And that might be a good segue for pause.
But the film is not black and white. It's gray. It's got gray tones all over it. It actually doesn't. Imagine a bunch of triangles and circles and squares. Well, that's too geometric. But it's really weird shapes. Like there's a scene where you see a church spire in Sin City, and it's a full page splash, and it's just a black page, and you got a little bit of white cut out, which is the church. Like it's very almost abstract. Okay, pause the podcast. Yes.
No worries. Okay, for pause the podcast, I'm going to say this film was a big deal in 2005. I think most people have seen it.
I think you should. I think you haven't seen it. Pause the podcast.
Oh,
absolutely.
Okay. That's what we're talking about. Okay. Yeah.
I think so. I think we're going to spoil some because there's some twists and turns in here.
All right. If you haven't seen it, okay, I'm on board with that. If you haven't seen it, pause the podcast. Yep.
Yeah. And I would say go read the first Sin City graphic novel, which was later renamed The Hard Goodbye, which was kind of a riff on Raymond Chandler's The Long Goodbye.
Yeah.
So last week I mistakenly thought this one covered Yellow Bastard, Hard Goodbye, and the Dame to Kill For, which I was incorrect about.
No, it's the Big Fat Kill, which you did also mention last week.
Yes, but it's it was Yellow
Hard
Bastard.
Goodbye, That Yellow Bastard, and the Big Fat Kill.
Right, okay, right.
And a kind of bridging story.
Yes, which is one of the short stories. He did a bunch of short stories as well. So as I was saying, it's really it's so distilled. Like, I think about, for me, it's Raymond Chandler is my favorite of those guys, and Marlowe is sad. Like, he's detective, but he's sad when he comes across this stuff, and he comes across dead bodies, or somebody stabs him in the back. He's not just like, I'm gonna get back at this guy. He's really regretful about it.
There's a lot of ennui and kind of... So, by Raymond Chandler, you of course mean the author, who was writing Potboilers in the
30s. And, yeah.
So this is the kind of like this is the golden age of the detective kind of novel.
Yeah.
Coming out of this is during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
It's the concepts of kind of like, since we were talking about Dick Tracy last week, with this sense of anger at the injustice of social institutions, desperation associated with poverty, and crime. So you have that taking shape in the forms of these novels, and also to a lesser extent the film of the period and the film noir.
Yes.
Of the time.
Yes. And it is interesting. There was a plot point in The Big Sleep, which was the big one because it got turned into the movie with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall.
Yep.
Where someone had killed the driver. I'm trying to remember what's so there was this driver. I think it was this driver gets killed, and they're making the movie, and then somebody on set says, "Who killed the driver?" And they're all looking at each other. Nobody knows. They ask the screenwriter. He doesn't know. They call up Raymond Chandler. He didn't know. So
brilliant.
It was really like, that's not what's important, because you're so subsumed into that world when you're in both the book and the movie. And the book especially, it's that he had this way with metaphor that was just incredible, and I think it was aped by everyone else. So anyway, take all that kind of sadness out of it, and just take I want revenge. I want to beat this guy up. I want to kill this guy real hard. Put in all that really hard-boiled detective dialogue, and take out all the color. They'll literally take out the color, take out the grays, just harsh, very harsh black and white.
Right.
And
fair enough. Yep.
There's some amazing pages where you see these like a black page with slashes of white, and you're like, "What is this?" And you turn the page, and you realize it's rain. But sometimes it takes a second like that to really realize what. It was so visually stunning at the time. I hadn't seen anything like it in comics.
It's singular. Absolutely singular.
Yeah, and totally committed. It's so committed to... It's not going to let up on the definition of these characters, and it's not going to let up on the art. It's not going to cheat. Occasionally later on we get some stories where there will be a splash of color, very specifically like a red dress, or this guy that's got yellow skin.
Very, very... And none at all in the original volume.
No.
And very, very little... Not something that's carried over to the film, because although the film obviously is predominantly grey, as you pointed out, meant to be black and white, but predominantly grey.
Yeah.
But there's still quite a bit of colour, and it almost made me think. We're getting ahead of ourselves here, but it almost reminded me of what you were saying about Dick Tracy last week, where sometimes I'm not sure why things are coloured. And why they aren't.
Right. Yes. we will talk about that. In depth. Remind me to talk about it. So some other things I want to mention were... so he also wrote a series called Give Me Liberty, drawn by Dave Gibbons.
Oh, really?
Frequent Alan Moore
collaborator of Alan Moore?
Yeah. I think the first one is awesome. I think the second... They just get worse and worse. The last one's just awful. And I think that's kind of the way it goes with the Sin City comics.
Starts great.
Well, okay, so I think there's about 7 or 8 Sin City volumes. So I read the first one as soon as it came out, which I've got here, Sin City, and then I read the Dame to Kill For, which is the second one, and I really loved that one. I loved it more than the original. I liked that it was like it had more of a plot around it.
Okay.
Which, looking back now, I would actually swap them around. I haven't reread Dame to Kill For, but I actually like the committedness of the first one. And then I read Big Fat Kill, which I really didn't like. To me, it was really dull and repetitive, and the visual style had become really familiar.
Yeah.
So that was the last one I read, and then I remember flipping through, I think, Yellow Bastard, and thinking, boy, it's just more of the same, and it's ugly and stupid, and so I didn't buy. There's 3. There's Family Values, Hell and Back, and Booze, Broads, and Bullets, which is maybe a short story collection.
Right.
So then he wrote a couple, and he drew a couple of Dark Knight Returns sequels, which is really like Neverending Story 2 or 3. Like, it's right there in the title. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And the second one he drew, I don't think he drew Dark Knight 3, but I need to go into all. I really have to go. I really have to go into all this stuff in a lot of detail that doesn't have to do with Sin City, but it does have to go. It does go into the psyche of Frank Miller, which that's my excuse for going into this.
Sure.
So the second one was drawn after Sin City. So he's drawing it in his Sin City style, these kind of geometric
This is
shapes.
the Dark Knight Returns 2.
DKR 2, where people are these kind of weird shapes and stuff, but it's been colored. And it doesn't... I think the problem, when I reread Sin City this week, I was like, the problem with DK, the art I thought was so grotesque, I hated it. But I thought, looking back, wait a second, the problem is it's in color. Like, it's got superhero colors with these weird-looking shapes that are supposed to represent people.
Right.
Anyway,
it should be black and white like the
DK. Yeah. So DKR 3.
The Master Race
was called the Master Race. Now we're getting into this territory. So he did this book called 300, which we're going to come back to for sure.
Yeah.
Because they made 2 movies, I think.
Oh yeah.
And about the Spartans. And that'll be another history one as well.
It will absolutely be one. Classical history. Yep.
And it comes up in Big Fat Kill.
I did notice that, but they left it out of the film.
They did leave it. Yes. So there's 300, and he does this book. He does this Batman book called Holy Terror.
Well, it was originally a Batman book.
Yes, Batman
Holy
goes
Terror
after
Batman.
Al Qaeda. DC said, "Sorry, we're not going to do this." He publishes it anyway. So we're now getting into the phase where he's really veered right wing, and then around the Occupy Wall Street movement happens, and he gives this interview.
Yeah.
Where he starts complaining about the protesters.
Yep.
Now, you go back and look at Batman Year One, where Batman goes after all the rich guys in Gotham, even though he's a rich guy.
Yep.
There's a famous scene where he crashes this dinner or meeting of all the rich dudes.
It's what I think of instantly when I think of the book.
And you're like...
Where it's lit only by like the Baked Alaska or something, or I don't remember. But yeah, they're having this huge feast. And he crashes through the window, and it's just like, your feasting is over. And so cool.
Yeah, you will no longer feed on Gotham or whatever. It's a great scene, great dialogue, beautifully drawn by Dave Mazzucchelli. It's like unbelievable artwork throughout. And now we've got Batman Holy Terror, and we've got him complaining about the protesters of Occupy Wall Street who are
he doesn't like them. He calls them pond scum. Famously on his blog or on his website or whatever.
Yeah.
Calls them pond scum.
Yeah.
Wake up, pond scum, he says.
Yeah.
We're in a war with an implacable enemy, by whom he means, like Islamic terrorism or Muslims generally, perhaps. It's not really clear. He does walk it back in the years since. But this is roundabout when... So this is roundabout when I started paying attention to Frank Miller.
Right.
Like I think perhaps quite a few people who are not big into comics. So I don't particularly like Frank Miller. I think we've talked about that before.
Yeah. I think he's walked back some of those comments.
I discovered that today, actually, doing a little research, and in the preceding days. But kind of a hard guy to like, especially in the last couple of decades.
So I think, like, kind of really up to Sin City, The Hard Goodbye, the first Sin City story.
Right.
I think everything's pretty much golden. Now, I haven't read Elektra Assassin. Oh, he wrote an Elektra... he wrote a series that was drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz, which is really cool.
Really?
That was Elektra Assassin. And then there was Elektra Lives or something, which was this graphic novel. But the Sienkiewicz series is really cool. Crazy, hard to follow. But really interesting. And I think there was another one drawn by Klaus Janson. But anyway, so I think all that stuff is good. And I think Sin City 1 is kind of the pinnacle of his comics. I think after this is where we start to...
The zenith.
He starts believing it. And it's also, there's something going on here because it's really... He starts to kind of... I mean, if you do 10 Sin Cities in a row, there's kind of a definition of masculinity in here.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Which is... In one volume where this is the concept of it, that's fine. As far, I mean, do it once and it's really it's interesting to go in there. But to do it 10 times, 7, 8 times is like, okay.
Yes.
And he's a guy sitting behind a drawing board, writing and drawing. So in his own, I don't think he realizes, but in Sin City he'd be the first guy to get shot and killed. Right, he would be like the pansy,
absolutely, that
would be murdered.
It's the same
by his own definitions of things, and he almost
he's got that cognitive dissonance, and with his exhortation at the Occupy Wall Street protests is like, oh yeah, wake up, nerds, we're in a war. It's like you're this weedy guy. yeah. Jesus, man. Yeah, no, and are you absolutely... I mean, I was going to save this for a little later, but no, we'll bring it out now.
Yeah, go into it.
No, I completely agree. This is absolutely the way I feel about Frank Miller, and it has to do partly with the way that I encountered his work.
Right.
So, the very first thing was Sin City. I watched Sin City, wow, Sin City, this is pretty cool.
Okay.
We'll get into why it's cool a bit later on. And I read the comics, and it's like, okay, as you say, yeah, this is interesting. It's good. It's a bit macho. There's an interesting idea of what constitutes, as you said, masculinity.
Yes, but also in the first one, the macho-ness is
it's tempered somewhat because
it's tempered by the mental illness of Marv.
Very unusual.
This man is mentally ill, and he has these crazy ideas of being macho, and you're like, okay, this is balanced. Whereas you get to the later ones, and these are men that are clear thinking.
Yeah, and yet they still behave the same way.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what I found. That I read Sin City and thought, oh, this is some interesting concepts. Obviously this is a strange world where people behave in strange ways.
Yes,
this is
100%. 100%.
And then, and I read The Dark Knight Returns as well. The Dark Knight Returns is a great book. I really like it. And so is Batman Year One. But The Dark Knight Returns especially, you read it and it's like, okay, Batman's old. This isn't like the Batman I remember that I really think of. He's kind of like aggressive and angry and so on.
Yes. Yes.
And then you read more of his stuff, and especially the post-1990s work, and it just keeps popping up again and again and again. Yeah. And it's like, oh, no, I can't stand this.
The other side of
Once was fine.
The other side of this coin is that the women are all strippers and prostitutes. Oh, yeah. They're all beautiful prostitutes.
Yeah.
And
there are only prostitutes and strippers.
Or there are, lipstick lesbians.
Oh, lipstick lesbians.
They're always we'll get to it.
Dyke, but God knows why.
Well, there's his parole officer appears in 2 scenes in this, and she's naked, but completely naked both times.
Both times.
In the movie, I think she puts on a robe. She puts on a bathrobe.
She's wearing underwear in the first scene, whereas in the comic she's not.
Yes, but I think in the movie, once she starts talking to him in the bathroom, she puts on a robe, and I don't think she does in the comic. I'll have to flip through it.
She doesn't because she doesn't care about Marv because she's gay.
Yeah,
so,
but
and
so yeah, okay.
It's kind of.
But again, I think for one, where this is the world you've created, and it's maybe the world through Marv's point of view. I'm like, okay, this is fine once.
Yes, you're right. But then it just keeps happening.
But it's, I mean, also, if you look at Year One, Frank Miller was the one who made Catwoman a prostitute. That bit of background origin story was not there before Frank Miller. He was like, okay, she's a prostitute. So it seems to be, it's really pervasive in his. It's not there. It wasn't there with Elektra. Elektra was not.
No. Right. No, I don't know much about. I don't know much about the Elektra stuff. When I look at when I think of Frank Miller's like '80s career before Dark Knight Rises, I just think ninjas.
Right. Yes. Yes. He definitely introduced the ninjas to Marvel.
one more thing I'll just mention quickly, since we are talking about it, and it's the, I don't know, what I want to call it grooming.
Yes.
Is that he tends to pair up prepubescent girls with older men.
Well,
not necessarily sexually, at least not at first.
Oh, I thought for sure it was not going to be in The Yellow Bastard, and then it turned out to be.
It absolutely was.
I was like, this is crazy. He's 67, she's 19.
It's grotesque. And then it's like, and then you go to things like The Dark Knight. Even in The Dark Knight Rises, his Robin is a prepubescent girl in The Dark Knight Rises. Oh, Dark Knight Returns. Sorry, not Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Even in the RoboCop 3 script, which we may or may not come back to someday.
Yeah. We have mentioned he did write the 2 RoboCop. I think he did story on RoboCop 2, and then he wrote RoboCop 3 completely.
I will talk a bit more. Yeah, I'll talk a bit more about this later on, because it has to do with how he became disillusioned with kind of like the Hollywood and the film industry before he became interested in again with Sin City.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just notice that it has... This is what really turned me off Frank Miller, and it's that I just noticed over... Again and again, you have these young girls latching on to... Like, becoming obsessed with... Old men.
Yes.
And you see it once, you let it go. But if you see it 2 or 3 or 4 times, you start to think, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Why is this here?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so...
But to quote someone, this is someone that you might have heard of, Kumar. He said, Frank Miller is someone whose work I've barely looked at for the past 20 years. This was around the time of Occupy Wall Street. I thought the Sin City stuff was unreconstructed misogyny. 300 appeared to be wildly ahistoric, homophobic, and just completely misguided.
Yeah.
I think that there has probably been a rather unpleasant sensibility apparent in Frank Miller's work for quite a long time.
Yeah.
That was, of course, Alan Moore.
Yep.
In 2011, responding in part to Frank Miller's comments of the same year about the Occupy Wall Street protesters.
Well, he wrote the introduction for Dark Knight Returns.
Well, of course, I read they're still...
I'm gonna ring the bell for that again.
I read they're still friends.
When were they? So it's hard to believe that Alan Moore would be friends with someone who he said those kinds of things about.
Okay, well, you're the expert. About the Occupy Wall Street protesters, Alan Moore, unsurprisingly sympathetic, being an anarchist. It's a completely justified howl of moral outrage, handled in a very intelligent, non-violent way, which is probably another reason why Frank Miller is less than pleased with it.
Yes, it's non-violent. Yes, you're right. There's a real thing about it. Solve problems with your guns and your fists.
He says, I'm sure if it had been a bunch of young sociopathic vigilantes with Batman makeup on their faces, he'd be more in favour of it.
Yeah, all these things are true. And yet, if you don't know anything about the author, after Sin City, I'd say, after Sin City 1, this is a great read.
I should say at this point, I think Sin City's rad, especially the first volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, should we talk about what it's about a little bit?
By all means.
So it's set in Basin City.
Yep.
Which is kind of a... Initially, you think Sin City, you think it's Las Vegas, but it's not, because prostitution is definitely illegal here. And then we get tar pits.
Right.
Which seems to be like the La Brea tar pits. So,
in Los Angeles.
So it's a fictional city called Basin City.
Somewhere in southwestern United States.
Yeah. So we get this guy called Marv, who's this big, scarred up, ugly dude.
Hideously ugly.
Hideously ugly. That's an important plot point, which comes up a couple times.
Yeah.
But for some reason, this beautiful woman is hooked up with him for a night.
Yeah.
And so he sleeps with her. He's blind drunk. He wakes up in the morning. She's dead in the bed next to him without a mark on her.
Yep.
Sirens are already coming up. So he knows somebody has framed him. So he basically goes on But right away, you get opening pages. It's just like, there's no backgrounds. He never draws backgrounds. They're on a heart-shaped bed. Goldie, the girl.
In blackness. Swimming in blackness.
Yes. Yeah. And you just get the bed, and that's it. And it's visually wild. It's a shot in the face right from the opening. So then he goes on this quest to find out what happened. So he goes to see his parole officer, Lucille. So we know he's been in jail.
Yeah.
And she's like, you can't go back to jail. So he fights the cops off.
Yeah.
He escapes. He goes to his mom's house.
Yes.
And to retrieve his gun,
yes.
which he's got hidden at home. Yes. This is an important point, which is because it's cut in the movie.
It is
that scene's not there, but I feel like it might have been filmed because he mentions his mom later, and it almost doesn't add up. Anyway, and we also find out that he needs medication because he gets confused, and he says, "I'm getting confused again." So he maybe hears things or thinks things, so he needs to take this medication.
People have diagnosed Marv, but I'm not going to bother. The point is, he's got.
Well, in fact, even in universe, Lucille was dating this psychiatrist, and she tried to psychoanalyze.
She tried to analyze me, but got scared.
Such an edgy line.
But they steal, like, Lucille...
But she can prescribe him the pills.
That's right.
Because she's a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So she prescribes him some manner of pills, which he eats like lollies.
Yeah. Yes.
It's hilarious, actually.
Okay, so then, he hits these dive bars.
Well,
he just starts.
He's going to get revenge.
He's going to get revenge because Goldie was, for the first time in his life, somebody was really nice to him, had awesome sex with him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I love you, Goldie."
Yeah.
Even though they had that one night, he's like, "Nobody ever treated me that nice before. I'm going to get revenge for you. I'm going to avenge you, and I'm going to get revenge for myself."
Yeah.
But then we see that Goldie seems to still be around.
I know. Dun, dun, dun.
And he smells the perfume. He's like, "Well, I'm getting confused again. It's my meds. I need to take my meds." Yeah, I'm just imagining that Goldie's still alive. Then this other this other Goldie attacks him in a car, like tries to run him over.
Yep.
He's like, no, I just imagined it. I need to take my meds.
Well, you've left out an interesting bit. So the first thing he does is he wants to shake something loose. So he goes to a bar and starts drinking and talking about Goldie.
Yeah.
And he specifically approaches a character called Weevil.
Yes.
Right? Who has very distinctive mutton chops.
Yes.
And a spiked hairdo.
Yeah.
And he's clearly Wolverine.
He's a really old, gross Wolverine. He's...
I don't know why Wolverine is in this comic. I looked it up. Apparently Frank Miller doesn't particularly like Wolverine, despite drawing one of the seminal runs on Wolverine in the early 80s.
Yeah.
This is hilarious. You might find this hilarious. I found an article that quoted an interview with Chris Claremont, where Chris Claremont had a lot of trouble convincing Frank Miller to do the art for that, because, quote, Frank Miller didn't want to write for a deranged, bloodthirsty psychopath.
Wow, that is... Well, that's interesting, because Daredevil was a really moral character, and he's religious. There's that the Catholic angle is there.
He didn't want to write for a one-note, blood-soaked berserker.
Wow, he drew the hell out of that. Because I was, reading that comic, the Chris Claremont, writing is like so-so, and the art's like really pretty great.
Yeah, well, look, this will tickle you.
Okay.
Apparently, the way Chris Claremont convinced Frank Miller to draw for it was by pitching Wolverine as a failed samurai.
Well, okay, that. You know what? That's actually the good thing about that comic.
Well, yeah.
He goes to Japan.
Yeah.
His old love Mariko is there, and there's all this heartbreak.
That's
and
where
stuff.
the Japan connection with Wolverine starts off.
Yes,
which is
exactly, and that's the cool. The idea of him being a Ronin is awesome.
That's where Frank Miller is such a weeaboo.
Yeah.
That all he had to do, like an anime nerd.
Wasn't there a character in RoboCop 3 named
Yeah,
Otomo?
there's a samurai. Yeah, there's a samurai robot.
His name is Otomo, named after Otomo Katsuhira, creator of Akira.
Right. They're so obsessed with the like Japanese pop culture that if you want to get him to do something,
well, he's the guy that he drew all those Lone Wolf and Cub covers, right?
Yes.
And he interviewed Kazuo Koike, I think for a Comics Interview or for the Comics Journal or something like that. There's a big interview that was conducted by Frank Miller. So that's definitely a big component, that kind of...
So if you want to get Frank Miller to do something that he doesn't want to do, you draw a Japanese connection to it, apparently.
Right. Okay, so where were we again? So
Weevil is like this obnoxious, like a dorky little...
By the way, some hitmen show up, and the side characters have really weird faces, which is something that kind of shows up in Dark Knight as well. When he draws like the secondary characters, they look like
the mutants.
In Dark Knight, they're mutants.
They're literally mutants, aren't they?
like
They have
radiation
sharp teeth.
mutants. Yeah,
Their heads like pencil erasers.
yeah. Well, we get a hitman here. Somebody here shows up with a pencil eraser head, and they're like not a mutant. It's just they're just weirdos that exist in the universe of Sin City.
It's just much like Dick Tracy, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. Yeah. So then he decides to go to Old Town. Old Town is the place where all the prostitutes are.
Yes.
At some stage. So he decides he's going to go there because he figures Goldie. He goes to the. Because he goes through all these people, he goes to this priest who says this name Rourke to him, and Rourke is the name of the guy. He's like
Rourke.
He's the cardinal of Sin City, and his family's all like his brother's a senator.
US senator.
Yep.
They have their fingers in every pie. They
you can't mess with them.
They run the state.
They have and they have this farm where the cops don't go, and this is established kind of in a later one, I think in Big.
Yeah, the priest,
a yellow bastard. It's like don't go out. The cops don't go out to the farm.
He goes to confession and he confesses to the priest. Lucky he knew which priest was behind the mesh, but he tells him that I just ask. I'm not a smart man. I just ask people when I want to know something. When I want to know something, I find someone and ask them. Sometimes I ask pretty hard.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the padre is connected to it somehow, drops his priestly facade in an instant and tells him, go out to the farm on the corner of such a road and such a road.
Yeah.
And then you'll find out, and you'll see if that, interesting line here, corpse of a slut was worth it.
Yes.
Corpse of a slut is an odd way to put it. I'd have put slut of a corpse, really. The other way around, maybe.
It's the corpse of a slut. She is a slut, and it's her corpse. So
that corpse of a slut, though.
Yeah. So he goes up to the farm, and then he finds that he's attacked by this guy. This stealthy dude that wears glasses, very nerdy, wears sweaters and has these, really thick glasses on. And he beats the crap out of Marv and puts Marv in a dungeon. Now, Marv is as tough as they come. And he puts Marv in a dungeon, and Lucille is down there again. Yeah. And there are all these heads of women on the wall. So we learn that all these women have been killed. All these prostitutes have been killed by and eaten by this guy Kevin, who's the nerd assassin, and also by Cardinal Rourke.
That's not clear yet.
Not clear yet, right. Okay, so he manages to escape by breaking down the door. He just bangs himself against it like a dumb ox. He's such a dumb ox the whole comic.
He's superhuman.
I love it. He's so dumb. And he just knocks himself until the door smashes. And then they make their escape. But then these security guys show up, and one guy's got this super weird tattoo on his face.
I think they're cops. So that's more clear in the film.
Okay, maybe they're cops, but this guy's got a weird ass face tattoo.
Lucille goes right up to them.
Yeah.
This is Lucille. She was in the dungeon too. Kevin ate her hand.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And Marv is about to attack the guys that come out of the helicopter.
Yeah.
Mercenaries, cops, whatever they are. She hits him with a rock. Goes up to him and says,
Rock,
I've got his gun, I'm his parole officer, he's unarmed, you don't need to kill him.
Yeah.
And they say, not yet, because we haven't talked to him yet. Yeah. And then they shoot her. And
yes. So, but she revealed to him that she knew Goldie, and she reveals that Goldie was a prostitute. So now he knows
that's how she got arrested. That's how she got caught.
Yes.
She started looking into Goldie, and Rourke's corrupt web immediately snatched her up and took her to the farm.
So Marv knows he needs to go to Old Town, which is where all the prostitutes are, and they're kind of self-governed little domain that's the cops don't go in there either. There's kind of this truce, like you don't bug us, we don't bug you, etc. Or they give freebies to the cops. I can't remember exactly what. Anyway,
something like that.
So he goes there, and Goldie, we thought this woman that looks exactly like Goldie, knocks him out. And they tie him up, and then they reveal that there's actually Goldie's twin sister, which is a thing that kind of, I feel like I've seen it in other noir things, or somebody's identity, where they have a face like that's one of the things that happens in one of the Parker novels.
There's an unknown.
He has somebody has a cosmetic surgery look different, and that also happens in Dame to Kill For. But
no, Big Fat Kill. Or Dame to Kill For.
It's in Dame to Kill For. Dwight is in Dame to Kill For, and he has to change his face at the end of it because he murders this woman.
And he has a new face in Big Fat. And it's even mentioned.
Mentioned, which is like how
in the film.
Yes, but anyway,
this is all over the book.
But
Are we going to do the plot of all three of the vignettes?
No, we'll just. I think we'll go deep into this one. So anyway, so he figures. So then he teams up. Then once they figure out who they are, he figures out this is Goldie's sister, Wendy, twin sister, Wendy, identical.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, we're gonna go back to the farm and finish this off. So he goes to the hardware store, buys all this gear, lays a big trap for Kevin.
Yep.
Manages to kill Kevin, goes up to Cardinal Rourke. Rourke reveals that he was eating the bodies also. And he has this real serial killer kind of thing about like he was eating their souls, etc.
Yep.
And he had to join in.
Yeah.
So he kills Rourke, and he knows he's going to get caught. He's like, he just wants to avenge Goldie.
Yeah.
For that one night. And he tells them like the girls suspect that he killed the other prostitutes as well, and he's like, "Would any one of you approach me with a face like this?" And
yes.
it's like,
so he can't even. He says it. He says in the to them. He says it to Goldie in the car, or Wendy in the car, or perhaps to them. Then he says, "I could never even buy a woman."
Yes, that's
with
right.
a face like mine.
That's right.
And in the comic, he's hideous in the comic.
Yeah.
He looks kind of like the Thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Very, very craggy.
Like whereas in the film he's Mickey Rourke.
Well, but he's got some prosthetics.
He's still
on
pretty
his,
ugly, but he doesn't look.
Stuff.
He doesn't look quite as hideous.
He's definitely got some applications on, a bit of the Tracy applications on. So he basically kills Rourke, and the cops show up, and they sentence him. And he gets in jail for a while waiting for the electric chair.
Yep.
And Wendy shows up one night, his last night before execution.
He keeps mistaking her for Goldie because of his condition.
Yes, because of his condition. He keeps thinking it's Goldie. There's a sweet scene, actually, where she says, "You can call me Goldie," when she sleeps with him. They put him in the chair, and they start doing the prayer, and he's like, "Would you get it over? I ain't got all night. Hurry up and get it over." I love it. It was so funny. And then they pull the thing, and he's still alive. He's just like, "Is that all you got?" They have to pull it again.
Yep.
Finally, he's dead, and just the end caption. And I loved it. I loved the ending of it too, and it was what a wild ride it was then and now. There's a female judge. So there's
Is the female judge in the comic?
Yes.
Okay.
Female judge is in the comic, and also the manager of the bar, that.
So this is literally the only characters that aren't hookers.
Yes, the manager of the bar is he says is a transsexual. Right. So there's her.
Yeah, you're right. It is a woman in the comic. You're right.
Yeah.
I thought that might have been a change for the film.
But she's not like. She's not beautiful. She's not beautiful.
She's judge age. She's judge age.
Yeah.
You know, she's looks like a regular person. The only regular woman probably in the whole show.
Okay, so then we. Yeah, big fat kill. Okay, so this one is about a cop, so this girl named Shelley, who's one of the waitresses at the bar. So we've skipped over one, which is Dame to Kill For, but she's dating this guy named Dwight.
Right.
Dwight wasn't Dame to Kill For, but he's had his face reconstructed so he looks like someone else because he's on the run. Otherwise he'll get busted for murder.
Played by Clive. Oh, okay, we're not on the film yet.
Yeah.
Right, we're still doing
so her ex-boyfriend comes knocking on her door while Dwight's there. They've just slept together or whatever, and he's raging. He's drunk. He's super angry. He busts in. He's like, and Dwight hides in the bathroom, and then he threatens. When the guy goes to the bathroom, he threatens the guy, shoves his head in the toilet.
Yeah.
And he's like,
and he drinks the toilet water.
Yes,
glug,
and then
glug.
So then the guys, this guy and his friends, the bad guy, Jackie Boy, who was Shelley's ex-boyfriend, they leave. They're like, they want her to call some people so they can have some women to hang out with. They want her to call her girlfriends. They're like, and she won't do it. They run off. They're gonna have some fun. Dwight's like, these guys are gonna go after women. I'm gonna stop them. So he jumps in, he chases after them. For various reasons, they end up driving into Old Town, which they shouldn't have done. Because then they start threatening one of the girls. They're trying to get this girl in the car, and she's like, I'm not going to do it. So the girls of Old Town are also awesome assassins.
One of them's literally Electra.
Well, one of them is, she's like a ninja.
Asian Electra.
Yeah.
She's an
what's her?
unreconstructed Asian stereotype.
What's her? Deadly Little Miho.
Oh, over and over. Deadly Little Miho. She never says a word. She throws ninja stars that are swastikas.
Yes, they're well, it depends which way you flip them.
Bad taste.
They're Buddhist.
Look, I know, and Frank Miller were here in the room.
Manji.
He'd say, "Hey, you ignoramus, don't you know that the swastika is a holy Buddhist symbol?" Yeah, but they're not ninja stars. It just looks dumb.
No, they can't fly.
No.
They're worse than the Batarang.
It just makes him look like an idiot.
Maybe the Batarang's worse. But anyway. So, basically, they for a whole issue, they kill this guy. And I remember, we read the collections, but I remember reading them in single issue form, and it was like a whole issue, and I'm like, okay, come on. So they really get... There's a great line, though, where Miho cuts off his head and says, and Dwight's narration says she doesn't quite cut his head off. She turns him into a Pez dispenser, which I loved. But then once they've killed him, they go through their pockets, they discover a badge, and this guy was actually a cop.
Yep.
So they're in real trouble because the truce will fall apart if they find out that the prostitutes killed a cop.
Yep.
So he has to hide the bodies. He pushes it up to the tar pits, but then he's attacked by some IRA assassins, which is like, okay, this is bizarre. So these IRA
because the mob are involved. It's not just the cops, it's a three-way struggle.
Yes.
The mob used to run Old Town.
Yeah.
Until the girls forced them out and negotiated the agreement with the cops.
Yes.
Where the cops would stay out and they would allow the girls to run their own area of town, to enforce their own law, to keep the mob out.
Yeah.
But if the cops were to come back in and disarm them or what have you, then the mob would move back in and it would go back to the bad old days when they were being beaten all the time and they were practically sex slaves.
Yes. Because they're autonomous right now. They're basically self-governing.
The mob is behind the IRA assassins, and the mob has found out about Johnny Boy being killed somehow. So
there's actually it's...
Dwight knows that there's a mole.
Yeah, there is a mole, and it's not super clear because the girl called her mother, and we don't know if they were listening to the call for some reason. It doesn't make any sense to me listening to random calls, but so they're like threatening to kill her mother. Anyway, so it comes out. So they lay a trap. He manages to kill all these IRA assassins because he's a tough guy. He's a tough dude, I guess. Yeah. It's really, there's really cliched stuff. Or not cliche, but bad taste stuff where the guy talks about once you've blown up a pub, that's what you want to... Yeah. You can't go
back to shooting someone when you've seen body parts flying everywhere and the roof going off a pub.
And I have to say, at this stage, like having somebody killed and having a group of assassins come in, Frank Miller has been totally outclassed by Garth Ennis, who can write this kind of story in his sleep. Because he would do, and it's not just because it's an IRA story, but he would you can see Garth Ennis' brain working where he's read some book about some platoon from World War I in Nepal or something, and he's like, okay, I'm going to write a comic about this. So he writes a comic, and it's like all the stuff is in there, right? And this is just broad caricatures of Irish people. Anyway,
we've gone from the interesting force of nature character of Marv in the dystopian Sin City world to whatever this assassins, ninja assassins.
Even the title, Big Fat Kill, is weak. It's like, it's fat. It's literally fat. So they lay a trap for the mob who are threatening Old Town now because they've found out about the dead cop. Yeah. And basically they lure them into an alley, and it's mentioned this is like 300. The 300, and when they're lured in there, then all the prostitutes are lined up on both roofs, on both sides of the island, and then they shoot them to death, and that's the end. You don't even get to see the shooting, really. It's just like they open fire, and it's like the end.
The end.
And it's pretty weak. Then we get to
yellow bastard.
That yellow bastard. So this one, now we're getting to a stage where really the dialogue was getting very bland and repetitive. Like he would say the same things over and over again. Yeah. Just repeating things. Characters would show up, like the senator shows up and he's describing how he's going to kill this guy, and it goes on for pages and pages and pages. And again, time and again, people show up and they're giving speeches about, I'm going to kill you like this, and just goes on pages and pages. Yep. So anyway, this one's about this little girl,
Nancy
Callahan, who we know is later as a stripper at that same bar that everybody goes to.
Yeah, because people can only be strippers.
Yes.
Or judges, apparently.
Or prostitutes.
Or prostitutes.
So these little girls have been abducted. This guy's last day as a cop, which is cliche number one, you know. But he gets a tip on where this abducted girl is. He goes, he rescues her, but his own partner turns on him and shoots him. Because the killer is protected, and we learn it's actually the son of Rourke.
Yeah,
Senator Rourke,
this time,
the other
not Cardinal Rourke, because obviously
Cardinal
he
Rourke.
doesn't have any kids.
Right.
Well, probably he does, but no official ones.
So he gets shot up, and he goes to the hospital. They fix him back up. Then the police interrogate him. This is exactly what happens in Hard Goodbye, by the way. Is Marv gets shot up after he kills Rourke,
and
then they fix him up in the hospital. And then he's beat up by the cops when they question him. He goes to jail for 8 years.
Yes.
And while he's there, this dude shows up. So he had killed or he put Rourke's son into a coma, Rourke Jr. into a coma.
Shot his nuts off.
Shot his
hand off. Shot his ear off. So he's in pieces.
Yes. And then one day, so he's getting letters
he gets letter
from Nancy every week on Thursday, but she's signed to Cordelia, so they don't know who she is now. Okay, well, let's go through the plot first. So one day, letter doesn't come, but there's this dude with weird yellow skin, very yellow. In the comics, it's just
bright
yellow, weird. Not like jaundiced yellow, like completely yellow. It's so bizarre. And he looks really weird. He's got these huge ears. Everything about him is super weird. And he doesn't know what's happened. And but one day he gets he opens a letter from her, and it's a finger. So he thinks she's been found by the bad guys. So he decides to finally sign the confession, which he wouldn't sign for 8 years, so that they let him out of jail. He gets out of jail, he goes looking for Nancy. He finds her at the bar. She's now 19 years old. And he's like, she recognized him. He's like, oh no. So we got to go on the run so these guys don't kill you. The yellow bastard is there following him. And then they
go to a motel room.
They go to a motel. She reveals that she's in love with him. She's 19. He's 67 at this stage. So then the yellow bastard finds him. He captures, he ties up the old man, Hartigan, the cop, and he abducts her, takes her back to the farm. And then he manages to escape, even though he's hanging from a noose, and he's 67 years old, and he used to have a bad heart. He's still super fit, and he managed to break out of this. He kills these assassins that are sent to pick up his body. He goes to the farm. He rescues her from Nancy, who's being whipped by the yellow bastard.
Who is Rourke Jr.
Who turns out to be Rourke Jr. They somehow magically regrew his penis and his ear.
But it wasn't without cost, because that's why he stinks and is yellow.
Yes, he stinks really bad.
Has big ears and is all deformed, because in the comics it says his father, Senator Rourke, paid through the nose to get everybody to have a crack at him.
But they use the word regrow, so this is not a thing we can do in our universe.
No.
You can maybe get a transplant of
who
these
knows?
bits.
Well, I mean...
Anyway, so then he sets her free.
He paid a terrible price to get his junk back.
So he sets her free, and then he decides he has to kill himself, because otherwise they're just going to keep going after him. Now, okay, here's my question about... what are we on? We're on Yellow Bastard. Why were they after Nancy?
Yeah, exactly.
And why, if they were after Nancy, why couldn't they find her? Because they know she was that little... So this 11-year-old girl was abducted, Nancy Callahan. Everybody knows this is in the news.
Yep.
He rescues her. Then he starts getting letters from... He says, don't write to me with... You can't be around me or they'll get to you.
Yep.
She says, I'll write you a letter every week and I'll sign it Cordelia.
Yep.
But, okay, now I'm confused. Like, wait a second.
This is a pretty significant plot hole. And there's no real way to reconcile it, because they knew who she was all along. And okay, so there's a potential explanation. Senator Rourke wants Hartigan to crack.
Yes.
He wants his final revenge on him.
Yeah.
And it becomes apparent over the 8 years that the only thing that Hartigan cares about is his weekly letter.
Okay.
So maybe Senator Rourke wants to get Cordelia, who he doesn't know the identity of.
Right.
So, or he just wants to trick Hartigan into thinking that he's not hearing from Cordelia anymore, so that he'll confess and he'll have that final victory.
Okay.
But that's not reconcilable with Rourke Jr., the yellow guy.
Yeah.
Because it's established that Rourke Jr., the yellow guy, really is obsessed with Nancy even 8 years later.
Yeah.
And he's been looking for her all this time.
Yeah.
And he's the one that engineered the situation. He sent Hartigan the finger, and had him leave, and then followed him from the jail all the way to first Nancy's house, and then to the bar, and then to their motel room, just so that he could rape her 8 years later.
Yes.
So, no, but he would have known all along who she was because it was public knowledge.
Yes.
So it doesn't make sense.
Maybe they needed to know that Cordelia was Nancy. It's so... No, it doesn't add up. It's really confusing.
Those two things can't be...
Yeah.
Those things can't be reconciled. It's a plot hole.
Yes.
An annoying one.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a character in this where there's this cop. So Lucille is also Hartigan's lawyer in this or something, or she's trying to get him off. She's trying to get him to sign the confession. There's this. So this part, there's pages of her talking to him.
Yeah.
And we got this cop in the background. We got his stop balloons talking about how bored he is. So it's almost like Frank Miller knows how boring the scene is, and he's injecting what he thinks is humor by having this cop say, "I'm so bored. My wife hates me." Every panel, we get a thought balloon from this cop that has nothing to do with it. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this is dragging on. This is really dragging. This character is so grotesque and boring. It's weird. I don't understand the regrowth at all. It just, to me, this was the point where, well, I hadn't read this. I'd stopped at Big Fat Kill.
Right.
15, 20 years ago.
Right. And this is all excised from the film, which is a clever editing choice, really. But you're right. I mean, I was bored. You read, this is the third one we read, obviously. I was jaded with the dialogue. I think even in Hard Goodbye.
Okay.
I think I've written edgy nonsense at least 3 times. But by this one, I'm just completely over
but it's edgy nonsense. But Marv is like he has
Marv is a very likable character.
Yes.
Even though, okay. Enough. Okay. Yeah, that's that. All right, but yes, it's dull, and the ending is such, like he just kills himself at the farm. You could have killed yourself in jail, and also
knowing how vindictive Senator Rourke is, you think he's not going to kill Nancy anyway, even if Hartigan's dead?
Also, how do we even know that Senator Rourke knows Hartigan did it? It's just no one knows.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
it's just such a lame ending.
Also,
it's a cop out. Okay. We're going to talk a bit more about this with the film.
Kevin is on the farm when he kills Rourke Jr. And Kevin doesn't show up. There's gunshots.
Yeah.
There's screaming.
Right. But Kevin is also a force of nature. He only cares about eating women.
Yes.
He's not going to save Rourke Jr.
Right. Okay.
He doesn't care about that. I liked that. He's just sitting reading his Bible.
He's reading a Bible.
And I felt like Kevin must know that.
Right.
Because he has...
Okay, yes, I buy that. I'll buy that.
I liked it. But here's the thing. I feel like... I'm going to talk a bit more about this when we come to the film. Okay. All right. So... The denouement is very unsatisfying, where he just shoots himself. There was no reason for him really to shoot himself at that point. He could have shot himself 8 years he could have shot himself... He could have... I don't know, gone on a hunger strike in jail if it was so important to protect Nancy. I don't know. And only at that point he decides what if he goes on the run with Nancy. It's like you said, Senator Rourke's going to kill him anyway. Going to kill her anyway. It doesn't matter if he's alive or dead.
Yeah.
Senator Rourke is, and he knows exactly who she is because he's known who she is all along. He's playing at cynicism like a downer ending.
Yeah.
But it's not really a downer ending because he gets everything he wants, which is Nancy safe, and also he's 67. This coming later onto the film, one of the things that irritates me a little about the comic and about the film is that it plays at cynicism, but it's actually these guys are heroes and get everything they want.
Yes. Yes,
but we'll talk
that's true. That's true.
And that's not really what I think of as a noir sensibility.
Yeah. I did want to mention one more before we leave the comics, which we're about to do. I want to mention there was one other series I didn't mention, which was called All-Star Batman and Robin, drawn by Jim Lee, and I think it was like 10 issues, and it was a big deal when it came out because Jim Lee is a superstar artist.
Yes.
Famously, the first issue came out, and there was this panel of Vicky Vale. She's walking around her apartment in her underwear. And there's one shot which is just of her butt, and the panties are drawn in exquisite detail, like so much detail. And we're like, okay, Jim Lee, what is up? What's your deal, Jim Lee?
Yeah.
Then DC published a special edition which included the script. And the script for this, I pulled it up because I remember this so clearly.
Brilliant.
Here's the script. These are the exact words of Frank Miller. Panel 1, closer, medium angle. Vicky continues. She cocks her head, tossing her hair. Detail her bra, all caps, bra. It'll drive him crazy, Jim. Panel 2, body shot, thigh up. Give us an even better angle on the babe. Front on, walking right at us. She knows what she's got. Make them drool. Then it says, okay, Jim, I'm shameless. Let's go with an ass shot. Panties detailed. Balloons from above. She's walking, restless as always. We can't take our eyes off her, especially since she's got one fine ass.
Oh, that's so gross. I can't believe that.
It was not Jim Lee's fault.
That's what Jim Lee had to work with.
That's what Jim Lee had to work with. Okay, so in 2005, we get this movie called, according to the title card, Frank Miller's Sin City.
That's right.
And it's directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Yes.
Who later, 10 years later, 15, directed Battle Angel Alita, based on a manga, which we'll get to. It's also got a guest spot directed by Quentin Tarantino. We don't know which sequence, but I know which sequence. Okay.
I read it. I did read it. It's the taxi ride. Not the taxi ride. Sorry, the drive from Old Town to the Tartars.
Oh, okay. That's not what it's not what I would guess. But anyway.
Oh, what did you think it would?
Well, I just thought. Okay, so there's a scene when Marv goes to the. So the amazing thing about this movie is it is word for word. Every word spoken by the characters is spoken in the comic.
Almost every.
But some parts are cut.
Well, there is. I think there's one line of dialogue.
Okay, so this is where Marv goes to buy the hardware. When he buys, I want some razor wire. I want gloves to handle the razor wire. He says to the hardware store clerk. Hardware store guy says, "Buffing up your home security," and Marv says, "You shouldn't ask people about their personal private business or something like that." In the movie, he says, "You bet
you bet your ass.
You bet your ass we are," or something. And I thought, okay, maybe here we've got a director that's allowing the actors to ad-lib a little bit, but I guess that's not the case.
I watched a behind-the-scenes featurette, and Miller kept a tight rein on the dialogue.
Right.
So okay, so we can go into the production.
I want to mention
he's co-director.
Okay. Yes, he's co-director, so it's two directors essentially. Now they might have gone for three, except I'm pretty sure you can't list three writers on a movie because the Writers Guild wants to maintain the integrity of the profession. Yep. So even if 30 people wrote a movie or a TV show, which is often the case, you got a table of writers and they're all writing jokes, but you're only allowed to list two maximum.
Well, you can't even have co-directors.
Yes.
Rodriguez had to resign from the Directors Guild in order for there to be the twofold director's credit on this movie.
Right, okay.
He actually resigned from the Guild.
Right.
Because he was so insistent
interesting now because the Russo brothers who are directing all the Marvel movies, it's like standard practice now.
Yeah.
And also, George Lucas had to resign from the Guild because he didn't put his name at the start of the movie, but at the end.
Right.
And they were like, that's not allowed. But now it's like every movie, you don't get... Anyway. So it's full CG backgrounds.
Yeah. Completely in front of a green screen.
Completely. And
no location.
To me, this is a weird progression for me for Rodriguez because you look at El Mariachi, he was he had access to a jail. Somehow somebody said, you can use this jail. So he wrote a jail scene into the script. He was working backwards. He's like, I have this thing, I'll put it in the script. And through the Spy Kids movies, he started going more and more CG backgrounds were happening. Yep. And finally he reached a stage where he's like, well, to me he's almost working opposite. And it's like, now I can do anything. So I just put anything in the background. And I actually think the opening scene, it's a bit dated. And it's really interesting compared to Dick Tracy because there you got the fake backgrounds and it's like we're trying to look fake.
It looks great though. The Dick Tracy, I really like the way Dick Tracy.
Yes, but it was trying to say this is not a real background.
Yeah.
Since I think they somehow got better, or maybe I stopped noticing the fakeness of the backgrounds.
I think we've been watching CGI. It's now standard. Especially for something like a superhero movie, 90% of it's shot in front of a green screen.
But the thing is, I think it works because this is a fake world. Sin City is such a it's not our world. It's the world of these hard dudes killing people.
Look, I think it looks...
And people talking in ways that people don't talk. In a sense, it works in the way that I thought Dick Tracy didn't work, but I don't know if it's intentional, but it's a fake background in a fake world, and I think, like, okay, that's...
Okay, I'll agree with that and elaborate on it a little. I agree. I think the film looks great. I really like the way the film looks.
Yes.
It almost always
I agree.
It almost always looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And I remember how extraordinary it was in 2005.
Everybody was talking about this movie when it came out. This is like it was really something else at the time. We'd never seen anything like it.
Nothing like it. You know, films had certainly been shot entirely in front of green screens before. The Star Wars prequels, for example. But like this, a whole world in the black, white shades of grey, almost no colour. Looked and I still think it looks good. It looks great.
Yeah, I agree.
What an aesthetic to see.
Yeah.
Some of the CGI hasn't held up to my modern eye, my 2023 eye. The cars.
Well, interesting thing about the cars is, I mean, in the comic, when the cars drive, you get a couple of scenes of them driving down the road. They're always 5 feet off the ground, like they're flying. It's like Roger Rabbit. Like the cars are just airborne all the time. And I was like, they did that in this movie. The cars fly. They fly like Roger Rabbit cars. They're not like real cars.
They look like little things. Like the cars, they're a bit too shiny. A bit. They couldn't render enough. You know, like a patina of like paint or damage or what have you. And they look like marionettes, sort of sitting in. It's pretty minor stuff. It's only because I've gotten used to a higher standard of CGI.
And there are sometimes, like, even right at the you get this opening scene with this assassin killing this woman, and I'm like, oh, this black and white, the CG's weird. I was like, but there's this moment where they drop it into pure black and white, like the comic, where the background is black and the silhouettes of the people are all white. And I was like, whoa. And then we get opening credits, which are comic book credits, which I always love. We've talked about it many times.
It had the comic book credits.
You get panels from the comic book as the opening credits.
Yep. Always happy to see that.
Yeah, so then we get splashes of color, like Goldie's hair.
Goldie herself is pretty colourful,
usually in color.
Girl's dress in the first scene.
That was actually the short story. Was the woman in the red dress or something like that? So that
and even her eyes light up as he gets close to her.
Yes,
seems like I don't know if they always know why they're colouring certain things.
Well, there's some things are inconsistent. So, like in the comic, if somebody gets shot and their blood is like on their shoulder, it's white.
Yeah.
And there are moments in the movie where you get that. You just get out this white drip on the shoulder. It's really cool. But sometimes you shoot people and red blood spurts out
all the time. It really got my goat. And when they're being punched in the face, like when the blood is on their face, it's usually red.
Yes.
Right? Except when Jackie Boy cops the muzzle of the gun in his forehead, then it's white.
Yes.
But Jackie Boy's blood was red in an earlier scene. It's like, is his blood red or is it white?
Yes. Also, but a thing I loved was like when you see all of Marv's band-aids, because he's covered in band-aids from breaking through glass and stuff.
That looks so cool.
It's in the movie white. They've just gone white. They've gone the white in the comics instead of going for a normal grayscale like the rest of him looks like.
Yeah.
They're shocking zero color white.
I always think about that when I think of the film. Like Marv in his white with his white bandages all over his face.
Yeah.
But the blood he's bleeding from his face is red.
Yes.
Why is the blood red?
Yes.
It's like they just coloured random things. Really.
Yes.
And it reminded me, as I said earlier, of your complaint about Dick Tracy, was that someone went to an effort to have this colour at this time, and it doesn't seem to mean anything.
Yes. I don't know what. Yeah.
Which is interesting because so much of the film is so close to the comics. Yeah. This is the most slavish adaptation of a film from its comics counterpoint, even more so than Verotic.
Yes.
Which was our go-to for using the comics as the story.
Yes. But interesting thing is they've changed the structure. They've chopped up the story into pieces. So you start with Hartigan saving Nancy as a kid, and then you cut away to Marv's story, and then
I think that's really good.
Maybe near the end of Marv's story, we actually meet Dwight meeting Shelley, the barmaid, in the middle of Marv's story, and then we get the end of Marv's story, then we get Dwight's story, and then we get the end of the Hartigan story with the Yellow Bastard. Interesting, there is a director's cut of this movie, which is apparently 26 minutes longer, but is, from what I've heard, what it is all the stories cut into sequence.
That's what I heard too.
Which is apparently super boring.
Yeah.
And apparently they run the credits 3 times.
How tedious.
So that's where the 26 minutes comes from, apparently.
But this is one of the things I've got it down here in my list of things I like.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like, just as you just pointed out, the anthology format.
Yes.
I think it's great. Because this is a comics kind of thing.
Yep.
This is something the comics do.
Yep.
Have anthology storytelling.
Yep.
The other thing I liked, crossovers. Another thing comics are famous for.
Yes.
Right?
And I remember I watched this in the cinema when it came out in 2005, and I remember, so Marv dies in the electric chair, and then we get Dwight's story. Dwight goes to the bar where Nancy is dancing, where he meets Shelley. Was it Dwight? Or no, it was Hartigan's story, where he goes to the bar to meet Nancy, and Marv is at the end.
It's Marv's story. Dwight... No, you're right. Okay, so the scene you're thinking of, Dwight's drinking in the bar when Marv goes up to the bar, and then Dwight has a line in Marv's story.
No, I'm talking about the other scene. I'm talking about the scene at the... So Marv dies in the electric chair, then we get Dwight's story, and then we get Hartigan's story. Hartigan comes back to find Nancy, and Marv's there drinking at the bar. And I remember the gasp from the audience at the time, and even now, it really like... I love the kind of the time twisty thing where this is happening before he went to the chair and all that stuff.
It just feels like a very comic book style.
It absolutely is,
And I really liked it.
Yeah. I like that there was 3 stories, but I like that they were chopped up, so we're getting pieces of them. So it wasn't like, when we get to Dwight, so we get, Marv walks into the bar during Marv's story, and then suddenly we get a voiceover. Instead of from Marv's, we get Dwight's voiceover, his thoughts about Marv, how if Marv was...
I want to talk about that a little later, if we can come back to it.
Yeah, and he goes on about how Marv, they would give him battle axe if he was living in the Middle Ages or whatever. But then that's it. And then he meets Shelley, and there's some eye contact, but all those things come back when we get to Dwight's story, where he's in Shelley's apartment.
Yeah, Shelley's in all 3 stories, played by Brittany Murphy.
Yes, who passed away like a year after this or something.
Right,
so where was it going with that? Oh yeah, so I like that. So apparently the director's cut, so-called director's cut, terrible, apparently.
Okay, yeah. But I was talking about how close an adaptation is, and how they were framing shots to look like the comic panels.
Yes.
Constantly.
Yes.
And in fact, you see it again and again. And it mostly makes sense, unlike Verotic, where we had like nonsense where people were facing the wrong direction and flowers crying on spiders that were across the room and crap like that.
Yes.
And this, it mostly makes sense, but there at some point, and I watched the behind the scenes as I told you, and there is shots of Miller and Rodriguez holding panels of the comic.
Right. Okay.
Like literally holding it.
Yeah.
Like we were. I mean, they were on clipboard, so they weren't actually holding the comic.
Yeah.
They had a blown up panel from the comic and using it literally as a storyboard. So it's not quite like Glenn Danzig handing greasy copies of erotica to his porn star extras.
We speculated about all that.
No. I'm coming down with that as fact. But yeah, and it mostly works, I think. But there are times when it doesn't. People get thrown around a lot by cars in this, in ways that they couldn't possibly do in real life.
Well, yes, okay, so I know what you mean. Like they get hit by a car and they go flying, or somebody even gets punched or kicked and they
fly
3
5
flips.
meters. Yeah,
they do 3 flips.
When Marv bursts out of his room at the start of the film.
Yeah.
A great panel in the comic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. He says, "I'll be right out," and then he's out and his arms are spread wide and he's like a battering ram and he's knocked cops every direction.
Yeah.
It's such a great kinetic panel. They copy it exactly for the film and it looks kind of goofy. Marv looks like he's trying to take wing. He's like flapping his arms.
Yeah.
I think it's a minor complaint. I think most of the time it works brilliantly.
I think it works the more you see it. I think the first time you see anything in this movie, you're like, what is this?
Right.
It's like, first time you hear somebody talk like that, you're like, this is like
nonsense.
This is like, it's like the big sleep, it's like so distilled, it's so hard boiled. Like when people don't talk like that, and then you see the splashes, the color, and it's like a shock, and then you see the way they move, and you see them get hit by a car and all that kind of stuff. But I think over the hour and 45 minutes, you just start to get more used to it. Or it's 2 hours and 4 minutes.
It's very obvious early on, especially in Marv's story, isn't it? And because, I mean, I excuse a lot for Marv. Like, Marv pulls the grate. Unlike in the comic where he bashes down the door, in the film he pulls the grate out.
That's why I brought that up, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine. Both are fine, because Marv he's kind of like Diabolic. he can do anything.
Yeah.
Because he's a literal force of nature.
Yeah.
But so I give things that Marv does as a part, but sometimes things happen to Marv, like when Wendy, Goldie's twin.
Yeah.
She runs him over like 5 times.
She shoots him. How did he get up from that?
Yeah, but she like hits him with a car and he goes like 10 meters in the air and does 3 flips and lands again.
Yeah.
And then he just gets up and he goes,
I need to take my medicine. I must be seeing things.
But
it's too much. And clearly, in a comic, it looks fantastic because you have a panel, and Marv has been
and it's one panel of him,
and he's on his way up, or he's on his way down, and it looks great. There's such a sense of movement, but then for him to undergo that entire sequence, to go all the way up and come all the way down, it's just a little too much for me.
I'm going to say it's not too much because I think this is Toontown. I think Sin City is Toontown, and I think for this world, if a person gets hit, they might go flying like that. Like
it's so funny that you mentioned Toontown.
To me, it just fits into it slots right into the world we're in. This weirdo, strange world where somehow like the Miho's throwing stars were better. I actually think all the dialogue. So we stripped out all the boring dialogue. I think the movie's version of Big Fat Kill and Yellow Bastard to me were enjoyable. Way more than the comics because they've cut out all the repetitive dialogue to a few moments.
Especially that Yellow Bastard. I think the Big Fat Kill is pretty boring. I was zoned out for most of that.
And the thing is, I love the way Clive Owen as Dwight delivered. The lines were so, I felt like they'd start at this stage I was getting tired. But when he says that line, the Big Fat Kill, it actually, I bought it. And even Bruce Willis, I felt like he was really reading his lines, especially the voiceover, like he meant it. Like I felt like he was there.
Yeah, Bruce Willis is great in this. Clive Owen is great in this. Mickey Rourke is fantastic.
We haven't mentioned, so Mickey Rourke is Marv. Bruce Willis is Hartigan.
Yeah.
It's an all-star cast, really.
Yeah, all-star cast.
Jessica Alba, who would later show up in 2 Fantastic Four movies, is Nancy.
Jessica Alba, who has a no nudity clause, is playing a stripper.
Yes, that actually worked for me. And also...
she's...
she's on
the Madonna end of the Madonna whore axis.
Right. And Carla Gugino, what's her name? So she plays Lucille.
Right.
And as I said,
topless.
Yes, she actually puts her bathrobe on, but she also went on to play the Silk Spectre in Watchmen. So we got another bell ring for that.
Oh my god, you're right. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And of course, Mickey Rourke ended up in playing Whiplash in Iron Man 2.
He did indeed. This was the beginning.
And Bruce Willis is going to be in a few more as well.
Right, like Red.
Red and Surrogates.
Okay. I don't know Surrogates, but I know Red.
Movie.
But yes, I should point out that this is a nitpick.
Yeah.
I mostly think you don't even notice that it's because you don't even notice that it's adapting almost scene for scene, shot for shot or panel for panel from the comic. It's only every now and again that I was taken out.
Right.
But this is mostly in praise of the film.
I'm going to say the thing that took me out of the film was the tertiary characters. Any thugs that show up, Jackie Boy's friends. All those actors.
Benicio del Toro as Jackie Boy.
Benicio del Toro as Jackie Boy is great. Doing a really gravelly voice, like super, like he actually ate gravel. And also his performance. So I want to say I loved his performance because in the comic, Jackie Boy comes in screaming his head off. He's shrieking at Shelley. And Benicio's he's so low key on it. He comes in, he's almost whispering his lines.
I love that.
These hateful lines. He's really whispering.
And he's pathetic too. Like, that's why it's such a reveal when he's the hero cop, Iron Jack, from the papers, because he's begging a lot, or he's whining, even though he has that gravelly delivery.
Yeah,
he's whining a lot. Why you gotta cut my nuts off?
Right. Come on, baby. That's really hurting my feelings.
Yeah. And I love Carla Gugino as Lucille because when she's captured by Kevin, Kevin had cut off her arm at this stage, and he made her watch. This is the thing. He made her watch
him eat
it. And in the comic, it's just like this weirdo thing, but she shrieks that line in this movie, and it's really like you really feel her horror at having had to watch it.
In the comic, her saying he made me watch it's outside a speech bubble and it's big jagged letters across the panel.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty faithful.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I thought, they've, Miller's. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's pretty much said, she's going to scream this real loud and the screen's going to shake a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we're going to cut to Elijah Wood. Elijah Wood as Kevin.
Elijah Wood as Kevin.
The Kevin in the comic, not much to him. Bit boring looking, nondescript.
Yeah.
Elijah Wood, supremely creepy.
Yeah, and this is 1 year after the final Lord of the Rings came out.
It's just astonishing how creepy he's barely in it.
Really upsetting.
He's less than 4 minutes, maybe, like less than 5 minutes easy. He's in the film, but man, he casts a long shadow.
Rutger Hauer as Cardinal York.
That's right.
Who would later go on to be in Batman Begins.
Okay, we'll see.
Really, yeah. So we've lost the scene where Marv goes home and he talks to his mom, who's off panel, but we hear her, I think. And
no, she comes on the panel. She comes on the panel.
And then he retrieves his gun. So we've lost that scene, so we don't know quite about how Marv got his... But he mentions his mom. I think, so after he's arrested, they threaten to kill his mom if he doesn't sign the confession or whatever.
Yeah, then he breaks the guy's arm.
And then he breaks arm and he signs the confession because his mom was starting. But we hadn't heard about his mom in the movie up to this point. And we didn't know where the gun came from. But actually,
but everyone just has a gun. They just pulled him out of Hammerspace.
Yes.
Everyone is always armed because guns are cool. Everyone's always drinking.
Yes.
It's very important. This is another thing about... Okay, so... If we finish talking about the plot, I want to talk a little bit about the tone.
Well, so there's a little bit about... I got a little bit more about plot.
Please, all right.
So some bits which were not in the comic. So when Jackie Boy rolls through Old Town and they finally attack him, the first thing they do is cut off his hand.
Yeah.
And then he gets out of his car, he tries to fight back
with
in the comic.
With the Swastika Ninja Star.
Yeah, but with the Swastika Ninja Star, the Manji Ninja Star, let's call it. But in the movie, she cuts off his hand and he goes to retrieve it. He has to actually pick up his other hand in his teeth and retrieve the
He plucks his fingers because his hand is frozen in rigor mortis as it's been cut off.
Yeah.
He uses his teeth to pluck his fingers off.
Yeah, great moment,
off the trigger, yeah.
And then he slips on it like it's a banana peel later. I can't remember if that was in the comic.
It was, and then he lands on the whatever you called it, on butt first. It sticks in his ass. And he's like, don't nobody laugh at this. This isn't funny.
Yes. Why did I write Gale? Who was Gale? Oh, Gale was the main... She's Rosario Dawson, who was also in...
Guardians of the Galaxy?
Was she?
No.
No, she's in Josie and the Pussycats.
Right.
A few years before this. There's a scene where, in the comic, it made no sense where... Well, kind of made no sense, where they load all the dead bodies into a car and Dwight has to... the car runs out of gas and Dwight has to push it the rest of the way to tar pits. And I'm like, how did he push it? It's full of bodies. Yeah. And he's beat up or whatever. But they show it in the movie. He pushes the car and I'm like, okay, it kind of works visually. Then Michael Clarke Duncan shows up as the big thug, the mob
thug. Gives Rosario Dawson a neck massage.
And he was also in Daredevil.
Rosario Dawson is in Daredevil. The TV series, not the film. She plays a nurse.
Oh, right. Okay. I watched that show. Okay, interesting. The Yellow Bastard series, when when Hartigan gets out of jail, he's picked up by a guy. In the comic,
it's someone on the force that always was, that still believed in him.
But in the movie, it was his partner, played by Michael Madsen.
Such great casting.
Yes, but why? Well, we really believe that he's picking him up and says it's water under the bridge or whatever.
It's one less character I got to be introduced to. Yeah. I think it's really clever because he even looks like Michael Madsen even looks a little bit like the character in the comic.
Yes.
But it's also Michael Madsen is a perfectly believable character to play a bent cop.
Yes.
Because of Reservoir Dogs and other things like that.
Yes.
And then he comes and picks him up and gives him a ride back, and he's there to just give him a little bit of exposition,
right,
and express a little bit of remorse.
Right.
I think it was a very clever piece of storytelling.
We got Powers Boothe as Senator Rourke.
Looks a little bit like Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump.
He gives a goddamn speech in here where he talks about when you lie and people... It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was just so 2023, the speech about when you lie, real power is not money or...
Guns.
Real power is lying. And people lie. People believe you even when they know you're lying. Yeah. When people go along with it.
Straight out of the comic too.
Yes.
In fact,
best line in the comic.
Yeah, I quite like that Yellow Bastard. Yeah. In fact, I really love those scenes where he's lying in the hospital bed, looking through the IV bottles.
Yes.
At the blackness at the end of the bed, and Senator Rourke just sort of looming out of the blackness and pushing his face right up against him, pointing a gun at him.
Yeah.
Very kind of sinister and threatening, even in the comic.
Yeah.
And in the film also carries over really well.
Powers Boothe is the ultimate all-time tough guy. He was he just looked tough. He was always a tough guy.
And I don't remember. Pale eyes too.
Yeah, I don't know if he ever played a soft character, as far as I know. And Yellow Bastard is played by Nick Stahl, I think. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
Anyway.
It sounds familiar.
So that's kind of... Okay, so let's talk about the tone of it, which is the thing you wanted to get to.
I did want to talk a little bit about the tone. I'm aware...
Oh no, we're good. We're good.
Okay, this is the new normal. We're going to routinely run to an hour 40 minutes now.
We're all good.
All right. So this is to do with the noir tone. Now, I mentioned a little earlier, so obviously you pointed out the comic owes a lot to noir. The film owes a lot to noir. You know, it's always set at night. It's always raining.
Yes.
It's very much about the underbelly of the world. But one of the things I feel like is that it's just only superficially engaging with noir. I don't think thematically it approaches what I think of as noir themes. You know, and like I said before, these guys, they triumph. Right. It's not cynical. He plays it at cynicism, and he plays at moral ambiguity, but actually these guys are essentially kind of heroic. Chivalrous.
Right. Well, people keep talking about Lancelot and what was the other knight? They keep throwing out these knight names. Whenever Dwight tries to rescue him, and they're like, "Well, we don't need your help, Lancelot," or something like that. That kind of thing.
Bizarre. He's like a murderer. And also, why does he have to say, the girls run their own section of town, right? Why does he have to come? Why is it his responsibility to drive these corpses to the tar pits? Why don't they just do it? They have to get
I think because they say that he was the one that...
No, he's insisting on it. It's his plan. They're hapless, running around
Yes.
And I didn't like that, because it's
No, because Gale says we're going to go to war with these guys, and Dwight's the one that says, you're not going to survive a war, you don't have enough guns or whatever.
Yeah. They're hopeless until he tells them what to do, and he's the one... None of them even go with him. He just drives Benicio del Toro to the top.
Well, the car's too full of bodies. I guess the back seat was open.
They give him a shit car. They sabotage it. They don't even give him a good car.
No.
It's very odd.
Yeah, I think they can afford a good car. I don't know why. I would want to say, let me just interject one thing is, when he said "deadly little mijo" 5 times, I felt it worked in the movie. I liked the way he delivered it in a way that he believed it, and I was like, okay, I'm here for it. Much like he said, when he says the big fat kill, I bought it.
Okay, that's cool.
Anyway.
That's cool.
Okay, go ahead.
But, no, well, I'm just repeating myself now, but, if we compare, you remember History of Violence and how toxic and damaging violence was in that film.
Yes.
In this film, these guys revel in violence, and it brings them everything they want.
Yes.
It never backfires on them.
Yes.
They get everything they want.
That's what
violence.
This world is. I think that's...
But that's not what the noir world is.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yes. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right.
And one thing about... When I think, say, take Chinatown, like that Roman Polanski's Chinatown classic neo-noir film, not from the great era of noir, but a newer one. Jake is absolutely at the mercy of forces bigger than himself.
Yes. Yeah.
He has no agency.
Yeah.
He's buffeted and helpless against the corruption. And at every turn, he's one step behind.
Yeah.
In this film, these guys are the masters of their domain.
Yes.
Right? This environment, it's supposed to be oppressive, they're always talking about how oppressive it is, especially Marv. Oh, the city.
Well, but he also says, "I like it here."
But yeah, she that's says, the thing. They love it there.
Nancy says, "Are you gonna leave?" Or no, who is it? He tells somebody to leave town
instead of being an oppressive hellscape.
It's a funny line, actually.
I'm not going to leave. Hell, I like it here
because it's crazy. We've seen so much craziness up to this point. And he's like,
it's their playground, and I don't think of that.
Well, it's a playground it's a playground that leads to death. I don't think it's quite as cheery as you make it out to.
Yes, no. Look, but
those two have died, and even Dwight at the end of Damned to Kill For, which is not part of this movie, has to go into hiding. Has to change his face. It's not really.
Yes, but I agree, and that's what I mean. That's what I think of when I say the film plays at cynicism,
right?
Because Marv does end up dying. But he dies triumphant.
Yes, but actually,
and it's the same with Hartigan.
Yes, okay.
Hartigan
So I'm going to say this is
himself.
maybe it's not quite noir, but Marv is even the master of his own death, because when they say the Padre starts giving the prayer and he's like, "Get it over with, I don't got all night." So he's telling them, pull that lever. He's ready to die.
Yeah.
They pull it, doesn't kill him. He says, "That all you got." He has to tell them to pull it again to kill him. So but I love that. I love that in Hard Goodbye. I love that it's beginning from page 1 to the last page.
It is. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I might as well say now I like the film.
Yeah.
But it's just disappointing that it's not really about anything. Like, it's just like there's no theme. And the theme is how cool are these guys. And I just feel
I think that's true of Sin City. Like,
if you're going to write comics for adults. Right, so this isn't Daredevil, really, in the 80s.
Oh, we got to talk about this. Remind me to come back to this.
I will.
Okay.
If you're going to write a comic for adult, it'd be nice if it was about something more than just how cool is it when people chop heads off.
Yes.
And how rad is this guy that punches a guy's head into nothingness?
Yes.
That's just... and this is the thing. To finish up my point...
Yeah.
This kind of feeds into how I feel about Miller generally.
Okay.
Which is that a lot of his themes just seem to be about how cool is it when the lone guy kicks butt and fights modernity. I've written here, crude nostalgia for when alphas ruled the land.
Yes.
So, or an imagined past when alphas were in charge. And there's this, and I want to come back to the line that this is the only original line in the film.
Okay.
So I think everything else is straight from the comic book, but it's Dwight's line in the bar, which you already mentioned.
Yeah.
Where he says that people think Marv is crazy, but he just had the rotten luck to be born in the wrong century.
Right.
He'd be right at home, swinging a battle axe on some ancient battlefield, or a sword with other gladiators just like him. Here's the thing. There's never been a time in history when it was great, when you were on the top of the pile, to be a murderous, insane psychopath.
Yes.
Gladiators in ancient Rome were not at the top of society. They were at the bottom of society. They were the scum of Rome. They weren't tossed girls like Nancy.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is what Dwight says. They slept in a dormitory with other slaves because they were literally slaves. And that line really kind of sums up, I think, Frank Miller's attitude to what he thinks masculinity is. Right?
Yes, but okay.
You will be rewarded with girls like Jessica Alba.
But that's what masculinity actually is in this universe, and maybe 3,000 years ago in this universe, that's what gladiators are like. So what I'm saying is,
but I don't like this universe. That's what I'm saying. This is Frank Miller's headscape,
look,
and I hate it.
I don't like this universe to live in, but to live in it for 200 pages of a comic was awesome. To live in it for 600 pages, dragged on. Yeah. And I will say that for 2 hours of a movie, I was happy to live in that world, because even there is no theme except that masculine violence wins. But I didn't need this to be true to Raymond Chandler, because nobody is true. Even his imitators at the time were not true to Raymond Chandler. So I'm gonna say that I think the lack of a theme or a wheat paper thin theme doesn't matter. I think that this movie is the visuals and the tone.
Yeah.
But the other thing is,
I agree with you.
But the thing I want to add is, I haven't seen Dame to Kill for the second movie,
No, me neither.
but from what I've heard, it's rated way less, and everyone's comments seem to be more of the same.
Yeah, that's
so
exactly right.
it seems to have the exact same problem as the comic book. 2 hours of this, great, put me in there. 4 hours of this, really, I've had enough already. You haven't done anything new.
Yeah, I think we're absolutely on the same page, and I completely agree. I like Sin City the comic book. I like Sin City the film. I don't like that it doesn't have a theme, and I don't like Frank Miller's oeuvre.
Yes.
Because it's just this over and over and over.
Yes.
So I will. That's my problem with it.
Yes.
That's all. Okay. I think we agree with one another. So on that note,
okay,
I can do some quick trivia.
Okay, let's hear it.
This film made 158.7 million.
Whoa.
Similar to Dick Tracy, although 15 years later.
Against what budget though?
Much less. $40 million budget, which is half the budget of...
It seems pretty high considering there were no location shooting or anything, but maybe it was all spent on the cast. Oh, by the way, so I mentioned the bad acting from the thugs and secondary, tertiary characters.
Right, oh yeah, like the loquacious thugs.
Also, one of the worst performances is by Frank Miller playing the priest, I found. Because when Marv says, your name came up in the comic, the priest's like, oh shit. And then he gives up all this, and he's like almost defensively, like, you have no chance against Rourke. She was just a
go out to the farm and see
very
if that
defensive.
Slut of a corpse is worth dying for.
Frank Miller can't deliver his own dialogue. No. He's really struggling in that scene.
Right, I didn't even realize that was Frank Miller.
Yeah.
I just thought it was an underwhelming actor.
Okay, so go ahead, sorry.
That's fine. There's no screenwriter credited. You might have noticed this.
I did notice that, yeah.
It just says based on the graphic novels by Frank Miller.
Yeah.
As part of Rodriguez's and Miller's agreement, or Rodriguez's drive to make the Sin City film.
Yeah.
And he's on record saying a few times things like, I'm trying to make, the Sin City movie.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to adapt it, I'm trying to translate it. I watched in that behind the scenes feature I watched, here's a quote, instead of trying to turn it into a movie, which would be terrible, let's take cinema and try and make it into this book. Mm-hmm. The mediums really are very similar. These are just snapshots of movement. Right.
Okay. I'm not sure I agree, but okay.
No, but that's
fine.
Since we're in the context of this 3 weekly kind of thing we're doing, it's kind of an evocative quotation.
Yeah.
That the intro the intro to the film, so that first scene where she's out on the balcony, girl in the red dress, Josh Hartnett as the assassin, I suppose. That was shot first as test footage.
Yes, I did hear this, yeah.
Yeah, as a way, pretty much to get Miller on board, because Rodriguez really wanted to make the film, but Miller had been burned with his experiences with RoboCop 2 and 3.
Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit.
Oh God, do we have time?
Yeah, we got time. We got all night. The thing I wanted to mention about this has nothing... Well, how much more trivia do I have?
This is the last bit. Just that Miller wasn't keen when Rodriguez approached him because he thought it was going to go out to a studio.
I'm kind of surprised by the existence of the movie at all.
Yeah.
And the reason is, in the letters pages, because I was reading the individual issues of Dame to Kill For and Big Fat Kill when they came out, there was a heated debate in the letters pages with letter writers writing to Frank Miller and saying comics should have a rating system. So he didn't even say... So a lot of comics at this time had suggested for mature readers on the cover, which just meant don't let your kids read it.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a bit of a uneasy compromise with the creators on this label. But then they were talking about introducing a rating system like we have with movies. And there was a raging debate in the letters. And also, this is one of the reasons that Alan Moore left DC.
Okay.
Because they were talking about introducing Yes, thank you. They were talking about introducing a rating system. He was like, no. He was dead set against it. And every letters page, somebody would write in saying, well, rating system is good because it lets you know, it gives you more freedom. If you put R on your book, you can draw nudity and blood. And he was all like, no, these are books, not movies. And when you have a rating system, then the creator has to say, the producer says, okay, we want something that's rated PG, and then the creator has to limit their creation to whatever they want.
Sure.
Or we see it with PG-13 now all the time. It's consistent. So because if you rate a movie PG, teenagers and adults won't go to it because they think it's for kids.
Yeah.
So they will put in.
I swear.
They'll put in every X-Men movie has Wolverine saying "fuck" in it.
Yeah.
He says you're allowed 3, I think, with PG-13. There's a certain stage where Wolverine show up in a movie that he's not supposed to be in, like X-Men First Class, say the F word, and that's it. Like for 10 seconds, just so they can get a PG-13 rating.
That was a good scene.
Yeah, it was a good scene, but it's like, so we can see what Frank Miller was talking about was 100% true. But every issue, somebody would write in and say, look, kids are just going to the shops and they're going to buy your book so they can look at the naked boobs. And they'd write long letters, he'd write back, you're wrong about everything, would be his response.
Yep.
So when this movie came out, and I watched it in 2005, and it was shot for shot, word for word, the same thing, but had a rating on it of rated R, I was like, well, he's made some kind of compromise, or he doesn't see that he could have put an R rating on his comic and had the same thing, and he doesn't, like, I'm not saying he should have put the R, I think maybe the right thing is for the movie to not have a rating, or I don't know what it is, but I'm saying he was doing 2 different things, and he...
Well, he said that films, like, a movie isn't a comic book. I mean, a movie has to have a rating.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like it doesn't... You say, like... But, I mean, they're different mediums, aren't they? One has to have a rating, and one doesn't have to have a rating.
Different industries.
The fact that...
One industry has to have ratings, and one... Well, I mean,
I kind of see what you're saying.
We've got book bannings happening all the time.
If a shot-for-shot remake of a Sin City comic book got an R rating, does that mean that the comic is R-rated?
Rated R. And what's his justification for not putting an R on... I mean, he had to put an R on the movie to get it made, because that's the industry. That's what it... Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting. Well... I dare say, because of that question and others, Miller didn't want to make the movie.
Right.
But Rodriguez, he thought it was going to go out to a studio. He thought they were going to have notes, just like this. We need 3 F words,
Yes, right.
And there was going to be some other director.
Yeah.
Because at this stage, Rodriguez, Miller maybe thought Rodriguez was going to produce it.
Yeah.
But Rodriguez said, no, I'm going to use my film studio.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the director,
yeah.
And we're only going to go with what's in the comic, and in fact, you're going to be the co-director, and I'm going to resign from the Directors Guild so you can get co-director credit.
Right.
And at this point, also, Frank Miller starts wearing a hat.
Right.
Because Robert Rodriguez always wears a hat.
Oh, interesting. Is that where he got that from?
I think so. All right, shall we do our questions?
But then Frank Miller also went on to do 300 in the Spirit.
Yes.
Where it allowed the...
So I read an article in Wired.
Okay.
And he became, because of, he was already a big name because of The Dark Knight Returns.
Yes.
But this film pushed him into the stratosphere, essentially, to the notice of people like me, for example, who didn't read a lot of comics in those days.
Yeah. Oh, I would say even Batman 89 would not exist without Dark Knight Returns.
For sure, but Frank Miller's name probably wasn't associated.
And of course,
Tim Burton.
Batman Begins is 100% year one. Like what's Aronofsky was going to make a year one movie before that.
But anyway. Frank Miller's Sin City.
Yes.
This one pushed him right up.
Yeah.
And he's now very rich.
Yeah.
And famous.
Yeah.
And so obviously, I guess he becomes enamored of the medium, of films, and he makes these other films, as you say, 300. He directs and writes, I think, The Spirit.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a flop.
Oh, yeah. Apparently it's one of the worst things ever.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. We're going to even tag an extra week onto... No, let's not go there. All right, okay. Let's do our ratings.
Okay. Comic. So, this is... I'm going to say yay, because I think... But it's conditional. I think you got to read the first one, and don't read the others. But I wouldn't ever say... Don't read Sin City. I think it's so singular and committed to what it is. I absolutely think people should read it. It's such a weirdo comic. It's not like any other comic, much like the movie. So definitely, I'm going to say yay, but only to the first one.
I completely agree. Also yay, same rationale.
Okay. Movie. I'm going to say yay. I'm still watching a second time. Almost 20 years later. Holy cow. Was still really... was laughing at the... audacity of it.
Yeah.
Surprised by the visuals of it, and the band-aids on Merv, and all that kind of stuff was like really wow. And the actors were all the main cast were really good, great cast.
It's a seminal film in this kind of green screen, fully animated kind of like, which is the standard now for a lot of movies, especially obviously for superhero Marvel movies. At this point, 2005, the Marvel juggernaut isn't rumbling yet. I think, when did Iron Man come out? Was that
2008?
All right, so it's in the future.
Yeah,
but a great film, still great visuals, great aesthetic.
Yeah.
Some brilliant performances. Mickey Rourke is really, really good.
Yeah.
Almost lovable as this psychotic mass murderer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Worth it, just for his performance alone. Yes, it's yay for me too.
Okay. Adaptation. I had to say yay. This is the most adapted. I mean, it's so scene for scene. It's the same. It's the even if it was different, it would be the guy that created it, directing it. So it's hard. It's impossible to say nay because one scene.
You can't say nay because it's so. You would be being contrary. You'd be being obstreperous if you said nay.
The only possible nay is to say that it's in gray, and not pure black and white, which is. I mean, they do the pure black and white in a couple of scenes where, like I mentioned, where it drops out and it goes to...
Like when Hardigan shoots himself, or at the beginning when it sort of fades to black and white and a silhouette, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think perhaps presumably it'd be impossible to do it entirely in...
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't look right. It wouldn't look right at all. You can tell if people are facing forwards or backwards, that kind of thing.
No, so, I agree. This is an adaptation among adaptations, so obviously it entirely adapts the aesthetic of the comic. It's also just in the choices, in some of the cuts it made.
The cut dialogue makes, like I said, I think it flows way better than the comic for the later stuff.
So it's a good adaptation as an adaptation, and it's a good adaptation as a transliteration.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's yay.
Okay.
Now I just want to do quickly before we finish up.
Yeah.
To sum up the last 3 weeks, which of the 3 films? So we'll do the yays again. We'll leave the comics out, but we'll just do the films. Which of the 3 films did you like the best?
I liked Sin City the best, but I'm more likely to rewatch Danger Diabolic.
I have almost the exact same thing to say.
I think this is.
I think I enjoyed. Oh, it's tough. I really like Danger Diabolic. I almost completely agree. I want to watch Diabolic again.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want to watch Sin City again in the immediate future. I'm going to watch it again down the track, I think.
Yeah.
Which brings... Okay, so my next question is, which of the 3 films was the best adaptation?
Sin City.
Okay. I'm going to be pretentious, Kumar.
Yeah.
I'm going to be pretentious... Well, which of the 3 was the best at grabbing something fundamental about comics?
Well, that was Danger Diabolic.
Well, that's what I'm going. That's what I mean with this question.
I mean, in terms of
because this one does the colors.
In a sense, this one doesn't. It doesn't adapt. In a sense, it's not an adaptation. It's just the film what's there. Well, it's almost a cartoon of.
Yeah.
An animation of the comic is.
Yes. Whereas Danger Diabolic, in
a sense, there's no problem solving in this.
Yeah. Because they just use a computer to make it look like the comic.
Yes.
You're completely right. Whereas Mario Bava is using this, this is late 60s.
Yeah.
He's using completely analog technology, film, how to set up shots.
Yeah.
I think of that great... You used it as the tie-in for that episode where he's coming out of his coma.
Yeah.
He reaches into the lens.
Yeah.
A scene that you won't see, I think, in any other... I don't think you can see it in any other film. He reaches to the lens, like almost into our face. That's the way it would look in a comic panel, and it's just so striking that his hand covers the screen as it reaches out from his body. It's a bit of a pretentious auteurs kind of answer, but I think Danger Diabolic was the best.
No, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair
cinematic adaptation.
It's exciting
of the comic
for
sense.
different reasons, for sure. Yeah.
I forgot to mention the Toontown connection. It's alright, I just meant... There was an article in the New York Times. There's always these articles in the New York Times, but this one it's literally called The Unreal Road from Toontown to Sin City.
Oh.
It's about... Well, the author of the article felt that Sin City wasn't a remake of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but that owed something to Who Framed Roger Rabbit because Toontown, like you said, was like Sin City, an entirely fantastical realm, and that, you know, like this is what he says. This is what films are going to become.
And that's a film noir too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. It is.
With the whole identity, and you know that identity
it's
thing.
Like it's like Chinatown, isn't it?
Yeah, the Wendy Goldie thing is like the incest in Chinatown. You know what I mean? Like this identity confusion thing.
Yes.
And Devon and Blue Dress is another one. Is another one that. Anyway, okay. Next week, so we're gonna do connect the dots to Rosario Dawson. We're gonna do Josie and the Pussycats. Can you remember what year it's from?
Doesn't matter.
I can't remember if it's before or after.
It's going to be a bit of a palate cleanser after this unrelenting
we totally need it.
Negativity and noir aesthetic.
Yes.
If not noir themes.
I'm trying. Was there something? Oh yeah. So the comics. Well, you know, when I was a kid, anytime you went to the grocery store, there was a rack of Archies at the checkout. So it was like the most available comic that was selling mostly reprints anywhere. Nobody really talked about it because it wasn't in comic shops, but it was. So I don't know. You go look online. You'll find some Josie and the Pussycats comics somewhere, I guess.
Great.
Or depending on where you are, I don't know if they still sell Archies in grocery stores, but anyway, there you go. Next week.